Just before I start talking to Nicolas, I just want to say that, so my name's Stephen Cummins. I'm been in SaaS for 18 years. I was part of Salesforce as a startup, and I've worked in many different areas. I'm a founder, CEO of my own right. The biggest thing I do right now is work for Algolia and the amazing SaaS team across various areas that where they're becoming a subscription company across media, and I have a lot of fun with these amazing guys. It is my privilege to introduce someone I've actually interviewed twice in the past when he was CEO of a far smaller company in 2017, but still was a happening company already. And again in 2018, and we had lunch and I've met him a few times in different areas. So, I'm delighted to see him here again. He's always very generous with his time. He's the original CEO and founder of Algolia, which is kind of API, one of those APIs as service companies, a bit like SendGrid, Twilio, but for the search component. So for B2B search, for company search. So when companies want their products and websites to be, to have really fast search and really relevant search, Algolia came in and took their inspiration from Google, which had set our expectations so high, but companies couldn't match it, to actually match that and sometimes better that within companies. And I saw it happen in action, actually, at Dreamforce before I met Nicolas. They went and made Salesforce's search way better, and that's a pretty serious company, but they were able to make it so much better in a couple of hours. I couldn't believe what they did. So, and Nicolas is an engineer by training. I think he's got a PhD. He's definitely, when it comes to culture, he's the first person that comes into my mind when I'm talking to people in the domain. He left Algolia, not as CEO. He's still with Algolia as a director on the board of directors, and he's still very much involved. Someone who helped grow the company and drove it. But he's moved to Y Combinator September on his first cohort. So he's also talking with a lot of founders of early stage companies. So without further ado, Nicolas, fantastic to see you. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, Stephen. I mean, I don't know what I can add. Like, you kind of described everything about me and Algolia already.
Okay, well, let's start off with one of the things I remember you telling me was when I actually asked you, what's the thing you're most proud of professionally? And you said it was the culture you created or helped create in Algolia. Talk to me about that.
Okay, let's start there. No, I still stand by that comment still today. I think the culture, that expression of like culture eats strategy for breakfast. I mean, culture is defining the way everyone in the company is going to behave. And so if you have the right culture, like whatever can happen to the company, to you, like kind of like bugs, issues, downtimes, whatever, that the team is going to react in the right way because they are in the culture, because they know what to do at any time. You have empowered them to do the best. And so that's why I think culture is such a critical component of any company. Yeah, and in any case, maybe before to dive in more about our story, you're going to have a culture. I don't think it's possible for a company not to have a culture. I think the big difference here is that the culture you want or not? And if you want to make sure that you're going to have the culture you want, you should be intentional about it. You should design the culture instead of letting things happen.
Okay, and by that you mean you should really work out with your co-founders at some stage, not too late on in the process, what that culture should be and what you agree should be the company culture, and then somehow acquire some sort of agency over the evolution of that. How did you go about doing that in the early-ish days?
So yes, that's exactly what I mean. And the culture is never done. It's never finished. The work, I mean, the company is going to scale, hopefully. And as the company scales, I mean, you cannot work the same way at 2 people and at 300 people. And so obviously the culture has to change. And that's sometimes a little difficult. And like, maybe I can tell you our story there, but you have up and downs. Like, culture is never done. So culture was probably to us something very important compared to most founders, because we were already like not that old, but like kind of like we had some experience in the industry already.
Sure.
We had no idea about what culture meant at that time. It was in 2012 when we founded the company. And at that time, we were not really in the ecosystem. We didn't have that kind of vocabulary. But we knew that we wanted to discuss the type of company we were going to create. And that was actually the day before I resigned, like basically the day before we committed to create the company. We spent like half a day with my co-founder speaking only about that. What type of company do we want to create? Just to make sure we're aligned. That was the only objectives. And it worked well. I mean, we ended up designing, like speaking of at that time, creating a culture, a company based on ownership. So culture of owners, which meant for us like people taking initiatives, it meant for us people who were empowered to do as they see fit because it was their company, like they were not just employees. Okay. And yeah, that was 1 year before hiring our first employee. So it was pretty early. It was not formalized, just an idea or concept. And 1 year later, we hired our first employee who is still with us today, our VP engineering. Maybe if that's useful, I was speaking of up and down. So maybe I can go quickly through some of the up and downs before to dive into specific questions. So I already explained what we started with. Well, it started to break at about 10 people. At that time, we had people who were relatively experienced because we were too small to be able to really take very junior people yet. Like wanted people who could basically who knew their trade already. And what happened is that they were reverting to their habits. Whatever we would say in interviews, they were just working and like reverting to their habits, which is normal. But their habit was not what we wanted. And so we did the first thing, like a first pass of formalizing the culture, which was very simple, a wiki page. Okay, what do we mean by ownership? That was it. And that worked. That was enough. It was basically making that explicit, making ourselves accountable on what we meant. So it worked until it didn't anymore. Like maybe 40 people, I would say, around that number. At that time in the life of the company, we were scaling pretty fast, and we needed to hire a few managers or promote from the company like a few managers.
Yes.
And we had people like telling us, "Hey, no, we cannot do that at Algolia." Why? Because it's not in our culture. Why? Because our culture is to be flat. No, we cannot like grow to a 1,000 people company by staying flat. It's not possible. Our culture is to be owners. It's not the same thing. And so there were a lot of misunderstanding about what was the culture. And people were speaking every day about the culture, but misusing it. And so we decided at that time, it was early 2016, when we spent a few months to work on the culture and formalize our core values, basically who we are. And we came up with 5 core values that were really defining who we were. I could spend a lot of time. I'm not sure that's the most useful here. But then I think I would say the following 2 years were kind of the golden age of the culture, if I can call that this way, because the values I think were well crafted, well explained, and we started to use them everywhere, from recruiting, which was very important. So we basically equipped all our interviewers with a list of possible questions they could pick from to test for each value. And in the list of interviews of the day, like you would have at least 1 interview per value, and then technical interview or whatever else that is needed. But we would at least assess each value explicitly during 1 interview, and to help interviewers, we had crafted some questions. But that's also some very simple things, like we had emojis in Slack. So every time someone was displaying a value, like a good value behavior, like people would react with emojis, like kind of like, hey, like care, like candor, like whatever, depending on the situation. And all of these that work really well. And we grew organically with that. It was working really well until it wasn't again. And I think that's one of these mistakes. We kind of became complacent because it was working so well. We were not really thinking about the culture anymore. I mean, we were thinking about the culture every single day, but it was not intentional. I mean, we were not crafting the culture anymore. It was there, it was working. Except that what we had done was to really formalize the who we were with these values, not the how we work.
Okay.
And at 50 people, that was not necessary. Everyone was knowing each other, like it was just working organically, like awesome. But when we started to reach like 150 people, that's when it started to break. Because by then, people didn't know each other anymore, like at least not everyone. Like it was not that simple to decide how to work. And we had kind of completely missed the fact that we also had to formalize the how we work, not only the who we are, but also the how we work, because the culture is everything. It's not just the who. And that led us to a new set of changes. And I think it's never finished, but that were more about how we make decisions, how do we set targets, like OKRs, like creating a lot of visibility around these topics. But we had a lot of friction around 2018, I think, due to that miss around how we work. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. And in fact, one of the things that changed from the first time I met you to kind of later was I remember when you were smaller, you talked about how you loved seeing engineers and salespeople jumping on the call. You sell to developers, it's a seed and grow play with developers, of course, and you loved the trust and the interplay there. And then you talked about, that was great until you got to a certain size, things got more formalized, teams became huge, and it didn't happen naturally, and that you'd need to kind of think about ways to create an environment in which you could get that cross-fertilization. Talk to me a little bit about how it changes with scale, that sort of teamwork dynamic.
I think one of the things we were very successful early on, and I think still today, when I speak with like some of our very recent hires, like senior hires, like we just hired a new CRO, for example, they are very impressed by how much the team cares. And care is one of our core value, and I think it really shows in how people behave, and they really care about their impact, about building the right company, and so on. In the early days, that would translate by like engineers caring about salespeople and the opposite, and that's pretty rare. I mean, that's something I've never seen elsewhere before. And when I was seeing like engineers like eager to help sales, that get on calls with them to convince customer, I mean, that's kind of like that was the highlight of my day when I was doing that. I mean, the biggest highlight I had like on this topic was when our engineering team were doing kind of a 1 day of site every quarter just to work on the organization, like objectives and so on. And they had some workshops that were at the initiatives of the team, not the managers or the VP or whatever. And one of these the topics that was suggested there was, hey, how can we better help the sales team at the end of the quarter? Like that coming from engineers, like pretty impressive.
That's great. Yeah.
But I realized that one of the things that made that helped with that, I mean, the culture was the main element. But then around the culture, we had a good setup. Like the office, especially in Paris, was just one floor. Like everyone was basically with everyone. Like it was very close. I mean, sometimes, like open space is not the best thing to concentrate or focus. But in that case, it was really great because it enabled people to see each other, to work with each other, and like there were mix and so on. But as you scale and we moved to another office with like several floors, and then people started to gather like by function, and like it basically became more complex. Like you could spend your whole day without seeing anyone. Like if you're a salesperson, you could spend the whole day without seeing anyone from engineering. I think that's something we missed. If I were to go back, I would probably be more proactive at figuring out maybe a floor plan or insist on having a single floor, bigger floor, whatever could work better to make sure that these people would interact way more. And yet today, all that is kind of moot with the pandemic. Everyone is remote for us, and yeah, I think it cannot work the same way anymore.
No.
Not that remote is a bad thing. Yeah, I think that if I were to create a new company today, I would probably create it for remote anyway. But I would try to be intentional about how we work, about some habits, some processes, whatever, to make that happen, like to make that interaction happen. Like not only the culture to sustain that, to make sure that it's the will, but also kind of like the setup, the how we work, to make sure that the opportunities are there for people to interact more cross-functionally.
And I think it's interesting to hear you say that, because, one of the implications of that is in pre-COVID days, you saw tremendous value in co-location.
Yeah.
A tremendous value. And I think it's a lesson for a lot of people. There's a lot of people who associate 100% distributed companies with great culture, partly because they have to have very good culture for it to work. But of course, there were great cultures inside many co-located companies too. And I think it's a lesson to people not to be religious about one thing or the other. But I guess the new reality makes it, of course, gives distributed a very powerful case.
I think the key thing with full remote companies is that they have to think about it way earlier than co-located companies. Like look at GitLab, like their handbook, like it's incredible what they've built, but they had to build it to make sure they were creating the right culture. Like when you are remote, you need more of these processes. It's a little more constraining, possibly, but you need to be way more intentional about that than when you are like co-located, because when you are in the same office, it's kind of like everything is organic. You don't need to write it down. When you are remote, you don't have a choice. You have to write it down.
Yes. And one thing that's always interested me, Nicolas, is, and I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, is the balance between, because culture, if a company develops a very positive culture, which is attracting new employees, it's good relationship with customers, et cetera, it's hard earned, and it becomes a marketing tool as well, but deservedly so. Do companies need to be careful about where they draw the line? If I remember my experience with Salesforce, one great use of that was trust.salesforce.com, where they made all their servers visible. They had a problem, they had downtime. They solved it by making themselves visible to everybody, so they had to keep it up all the time. They built more trust with customers by forcing themselves. But then on the other side, they have this thing called Ohana, or family, which depends on your point of view, but it's kind of saying that the company is as important as the family, which is what a lot of companies are doing that. A lot of large, not just Salesforce, loads of large companies do that. What's your feeling on where you draw the line between developing authentic culture and then taking that culture and using it for branding or for community or for ecosystem build? What are your thoughts on that?
It's a lot of topics here gathered in the same question.
Sorry, yeah, it is.
Let me try to unravel. I can to go after all these elements. I think the first element, the word family. I've always avoided using that word. I don't consider the company to be a family, and I think it's probably, I completely understand how and why people would do that, and because there is this sense of belonging, and that's very important. But
yes.
But if I take a step back, and I think in our case, we were helped by the fact that both my co-founder and I had a family before creating the company. We had a wife, kids. And so for us, it was very clear that it was not the same thing. We had a family, and we haven't discussed about that, like in the early days. If we have to stack rank family and company, family is first. I mean, obviously,
sure.
Even if in the way you act day after day, sometimes, that's not that simple. But anyway, like in principle, like family is first. And so for us, it was never a question of like calling the company a family. That being said, like it doesn't mean that it's not a tight group of like-minded people that have a big sense of belonging. It doesn't mean that you cannot have that same feeling of like a group tight, like together, like going, like I don't know, able to
like a football team.
Yeah, like a football team, like you have a challenge. As a team, you can go after any challenge, and that's really working. So I would be careful about using that word family. But I know. I mean, everyone is different. But I would probably guess that most people calling their company a family don't have kids, or at least didn't have kids before creating the company. That is
I
different.
agree.
It's different. Now, in terms of marketing or how you speak about the company, we never really leverage the culture as a marketing tool, at least not intentionally. In a way, that's what I'm doing right now, speaking of the culture of the company, but it was never kind of like a purpose. That being
Yes.
said, the culture helps in terms of the perception from the market. In our culture, like I told you about care, but like another of our core value is trust.
Yes.
And these elements help a lot. By the way, like another quick learning here, values, the words you use don't matter at all.
Okay.
Most companies have the same words or like similar words. Like if you kind of try to analyze the culture, like it's 80% similar. Like maybe they're like 20% a little different. Like, and we do have like some differences, but trust, care, that kind of like things. Everyone is going to say they care about customers, and like everyone can say that. It's how you act on it that matters. It's not the words. But let's go back to care and trust. Well, of course, we cared about customers and we trusted each other, but trust can also apply to customers. If you have an issue, a downtime, a bug, whatever, don't hide. Trust your customers. Be transparent. For us, it was also about our interaction with our community. And the truth is that when you do that and you show your care genuinely, it creates lifelong customers. It's an opportunity. You have a downtime. Well, of course, that's not something you would do on purpose, but it's an opportunity to show the customers how much you care for them, to help them, like to really own the mistake or whatever happened. And by the way you are going to react, they are going to be possibly blown away. And people know that shit happens. I mean, all their services are done one day or another. And even if they trust you, at some point they know that it's possible to have a downtime or some bug or whatever. But if it's how you react to these that matters. And a customer that goes through that may actually become a better customer later on than if they had never gone through an issue like that.
That's great. I love that. And by the way, there's a fun comment from Annabelle DeVetter. In the comments, she said that she agrees with you completely about not saying family, and she said jokingly in an interview, "Thanks to the interviewer in the company, but I have a dysfunctional family at home. I don't need one at work." So Alex was asking, did she get the job? I wonder, did she get the job? Now that's culture, the impact of culture, one aspect of culture on customers. If we think about employees, of course, which is super important too. I read a blog piece recently by Tom Tungus, who writes very good pieces, but he was looking at Ray Dalio's principles, and he tremendous piece of work, and he was looking at the culture of Netflix, and he drew a conclusion that I'd slightly disagree with, which is that he felt that they were engendering a powerful sense of belonging or rejection in the company. I believe in engendering a powerful sense of belonging, but you should be able to find out or much earlier, before there's a sense of rejection, if something's not working. What's your feeling on that?
So I've not read the post, so I may I
quote it directly though.
yeah. I want to just a grain of thought there, but I probably would agree with him. I think the more explicit you can be about the culture, the better. And I think basically, let's say that differently. If someone feels the company is not for them, that's the rejection part. You want that to happen the earlier the possible, the earlier
Sure.
the best. So if they realize that before applying, it's better. Like nobody wastes time. If they realize that during interviews, it's better than joining the company and then realizing that later on. But even if they realize that their first week, it's better than like a year later. I don't know how to. So the earlier the better, and it's kind of like a way to filter for false positives. You want the people to apply to the company to be the right fit for to enjoy the company, to enjoy their job. And culture can be very opinionated. So it's better to display these opinions very publicly so that you avoid mishires. There is nothing worse than a mishire, like bad culture fit. I mean, and not again, but I want to be very careful about like what we mean by culture fit here, because culture fit is also a loaded word. I mean, I don't know for you, but I guess that everyone now, most people now accept that diversity is extremely important, for example. And when I say diversity, it's not only gender or race, it can be also opinions, like way to work, it can be many things. And so sometimes when we speak about culture fit, it's kind of like going against diversity. And that's not at all what I mean. Culture, for me, it's more about like core values, like core things that can be completely irrelevant of like diversity. I mean, maybe you don't want, maybe there is like for example, someone who doesn't want to work with, I don't know, to be candid, like which is one of our core value, wouldn't work here, and maybe that's kind of missing diversity here, but I don't think so. I think that's kind of like what defines us. And so being opinionated here, explicitly claiming, okay, what do we mean by our culture? What do we do? Like what type of decision we could make in one situation or another is great to do publicly, so that people who don't recognize themselves are not going to apply.
Okay. And I suppose by going too extreme on it, it's the core value as opposed to some of the how it manifests itself. If I suppose different people have different ways of doing the best thing for a company, and they can appear quite different, but if the core value underneath all of that, if they're actually rowing in the same direction, which is close to one of the values of SaaS Talk actually, it can work, and it allows a company to grow by having, I suppose, different types of people.
It's a fine line. It's a fine line that's very important to get right, because you want to encourage diversity, and obviously like gender, race, and everything, like a sexual orientation, like whatever you name it, but also the way to work, like the way to think. Like you want to have people that are analytical, but also like a good mix of left and right brain, like a good mix of, I don't know, like different styles. I don't know how to explain that. And that's very difficult to do when you are misinterpreting culture fit. Culture fit is not hiring people like you. It's just hiring people who share the same core values.
So yeah, exactly. It's like, I suppose if you think of a political movement or something like that, you could have all sorts of personalities within that. But they have some sort of, maybe depends. Politics is politics, but I understand you. Now we're getting to the point where we're going to ask the audience to send some messages in. The beauty of this is I can keep asking Nicolas questions.
Hi, sir. Steven, Nicolas.
How are you, Elton?
Good. I'm having a good beer on the night. There's Thanksgiving night,
Good.
So yeah, I mean this day. So I just want to recap on Nicolas, some of the case study that I've gone through with the clients here on the SaaS. So they're saying that most of the time when we develop product on the SaaS systems, like, I need to develop a lot of features and keep up with the speed of enrollment. And then in the process that I need to build up a lot of customer or key hire acquisitions, and then like getting alignment at that speed, especially being pressured by investors, is quite tough. So I wanted to think like, how do you strategically plan all this? Because your scenario just now was scaling on Algolia was quite interesting. Like in the times of pandemic, we can't really align each other so easily as what it is pre-COVID.
Yeah, I think alignment is kind of like so it's kind of like how you balance basically where you invest your time. And I don't think alignment, you can spend enough time on it. And I think I did that mistake in the early days. Actually, the culture probably was slowing me down. It took me some time, like until that second kind of recognition, like at 150 people, where we realized that we need to be more explicit about how we work. And that's when we really work explicitly about stating the mission, exactly where we are going, how, where, like, all of these elements, and eventually translating that in OKRs and basically building clarity. In the early days, that clarity was kind of increasing, kind of like we were seeing each other in the office, we were chatting over coffee, so we didn't feel the same need. But that clarity is kind of necessary, because the thing is that if you have like, what's the expression? You have like many people rowing in a boat, and if they don't row in the same direction, you are going nowhere. And that's basically what's happened here if you don't have alignment. And so alignment, I would prioritize that depending on the size of the team. If you can increase the clarity by, say, 10% by spending more time on that, that 10% has incredible leverage because maybe your 10 people team is going to do a better job. And it's 10 people, it's not just you. It's like 10 people who are going to go in the right direction, make better decisions because they'll know where you want to go, where the company should go, without needing you to be just next to them constantly. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, of course. Is there like a matrix that you do measure on like weekly basis or quarterly? Because like quarterly reviews comes in and then they say that, oh, this is employee, we need to develop the product, but end up you are like having build relationship with the sales and technical team most of the time. So that's
yeah. My thing is that at high level, you decide of the direction. You are very clear with the team about the direction you are going, and you let them do the rest. You empower them to figure out the details. So you don't necessarily need to decide of all the details by yourself. What you need is to set the direction, and then the team is going to figure out the details by themselves.
That's cool. Thanks. Thanks.
You're welcome. Thanks.
Right.
Fantastic. I'm just having a look for Michael Razor. I can bring him in here if I can find him. There, you brought somebody else in. That's great. How you doing, Damien?
Very good, thank you. Bonjour, Nicolas. Long time to see. Yeah, my question was that in the current circumstances and building remote team, if you were to be put in that specific space nowadays, how quickly would you accelerate actually your cultural fit, your cultural awareness? Because from our perspective, we work with teams in different places already, and we're quite small. But I just would love to have your views on this if you were to do this today.
Yeah. So there is a big difference between me today and me 8 years ago. So if it's me today, I would do that day one. Me 8 years ago, I wouldn't know better. So no, I think that now that people are way more remote, and I would definitely consider remote first, like remote only company, full remote company today, because there are so many advantages. But that means that you need to be explicit day one. I mean, basically that should be part of, I mean, it's going to take a lot of time to design that culture, what you want. It's not a one-shot thing. So better start working on it, like, maybe a weekly or 1 hour set aside to think about these things, like discuss with the team. Maybe during your Hollands or your, like, whatever gathering you have, remote, like on Zoom or whatever, maybe you can make sure you have like half an hour or 15 minutes dedicated to how we work, and like, is there any suggestions how we could improve the setup? Like, I don't know, try to empower the people. I would think about that way earlier. One of the things I would recommend to, sorry, I just think about that as you are asking the question. There is a resource, a book that I would have loved to read back then, called A Culture Map by, I think it's Erin Meyer, something like that.
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend that book. It's not a business, it's not a startup book. It's not really a culture book, but it's really something that can help you really better understand the culture of different countries. Different, like even inside the United States, like different states, like kind of better understand how different people can be and how they are going to interpret your behavior, sometimes with like opposite ways. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that one. It's probably a book today I would force all my leadership to read. Yeah, like we all have like so more diverse teams today that we had like 10 years ago. It has become even more important, and of course, when you are remote, you can have like team members from everywhere in the world, so it's even more important.
Okay. Thank you.
Merci beaucoup, Damien Mongon.
Merci.
Et aussi, merci. Et aussi, also Elton Kwa. Thank you so much, Elton. Hey.
Thanks.
Annabelle De Vetter, how are you?
I'm fine. I was wondering, Nicolas, if you could share some practical examples about how you make sure that people feel that there is trust in the company. If you think that, people are like diverse teams, and also like people have, somebody might read or hear like, oh, in this company, if you make a mistake, we're okay with that. But there's a difference between reading that and actually feeling that it's okay. So did you over the course of the years do practical things to make people really believe it and feel it?
I think it's all comes from like actually witnessing such things. And the thing is that, of course, new employees are not going to have that context. And so I found a lot of power in anecdotes. So let me tell you. So as we were scaling the company in the early days, a new team member would have a lunch with each co-founder separately, one-on-one. And during that lunch, it was kind of like super open. We discussed culture, of course, but like any kind of topic. And as we scaled, obviously it couldn't work anymore. And so we ended up like having a group lunch, like with only one of the founders and so on. But it was not that great because it was kind of a little random. And so I don't remember how long ago, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, we started to do something which was our culture 101 session in the onboarding. It was a 1 hour session with either of the founders, like either my co-founder or myself, and still there, except I don't do them anymore, but they are still doing it. And once a month, all the new employees of the month, like either in the US with me or in Europe with my co-founder, we would go through the history of the culture, like each value, like what we mean exactly by each value, and we would tell like plenty of anecdotes. We basically illustrate each value with examples of what happened in the life of the company. And usually by the end of that session, people would like, wow, like would belong, like way more, they would understand, they would trust us. We would show that we are like approachable, like we were not just the CEO, CTO, we were like just team members. And by sharing with authenticity, with vulnerability during this session, it really, like it was a great way to scale, basically. 1 hour a month was not enough. It's never enough, but was kind of like a very well used 1 hour. And that's so much more, I don't know, so much better than.
Yeah, I think it's, I hear myself twice. I think it's great that you actually took the time. Like, I'm sure that hour was well spent. And that
and we share, the power of anecdotes. I mean, it's kind of like crazy.
I'm a marketer. The power of the story is no stranger to me. It's indeed, people remember if you tell an anecdote. So okay, that was great. Thank you for that.
Thank you so much, Annabelle. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Great question. Bye. Just want to say thank you to Alton, who sent us a link to Culture Map. It's not the first time Culture Map's been recommended. And also the positivity. How you doing, Alex? Fiuma.
I'm good. Good to see you, Alex. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Yeah, very good. Sharing your time with us and our community again. I think one of the I'm trying to think how many SaaS-Doc events you've spoken at now, but it's been quite a few. But really, each time, again, I kind of said it at the beginning that I learn something new every time. And again, with this focus on company culture, getting some great insights. So I've got 3 questions for you, Nicolas, and you can answer them as quickly or as you want, and in any order. Okay.
Yes. No.
Okay. Yeah. First question is burnout this year. Like everybody's kind of feeling it. Everybody's kind of talking about it. I didn't really hear too much as a CEO about burnout in 2019. And sorry, my dog is the witching hour for my dog, so you might hear her in as well. But this year it's very commonplace. And as you've stepped away from the day-to-day role with Algolia this year, but you're obviously still aware of what's happening within the business. How is Algolia managing burnout, or how are they feeling, or what are you seeing with the companies and the startups that you're working? So that's one question. Second question is, and forgive me if Stephen asked this already, why did you replace yourself as CEO when you did? And then third question is, in 2016, I think it was 2016, in Dublin SaaS Society, we were having a little conversation, glass of wine over lunch, which was nice, very continental. And you said to me, you know, SaaS Doc should merge with SaaSta at the time. Do you still think we should do that? So that.
Okay, that's very funny question. Okay. So burnout first. I think, I mean, there is no, I mean, obviously the shift toward remote was good and bad. And I think what we've seen is actually most of the tension was not because of the remote as much as the, you know, the shelter in place kind of like that you had everywhere in the world. And like I remember like some of my Paris team members, like kind of like, let's say they had like a partner and 2 kids and are in a small apartment and they kind of move. I mean, that was way worse than whatever could happen on the job. So it's more about supporting. It was more for us about supporting them, kind of like, yeah, well, we basically adapted their work hours. Like we kind of tried to be as adaptable as possible. And the truth is that it was compensated, like some of these extreme were compensating by the other side. We had some people who were way more productive by being remote. So kind of like balanced out each other, but as a team, we kind of tried to be together there and kind of help each other. Yeah, I would say that kind of worked. And I think at the end of the day, it's more about making sure you listen and you show that you listen. I mean, it's more, I remember when we had the Black Lives Matter kind of like craziness, like the death of George Floyd. I mean, we had like some listening groups, like for all the people who felt strongly about what was happening in the world. We had some external people coming just to help us, like tell the story, like answer some questions. It's showing that you care, basically. At the end of the day, it's just that. Yeah. Caring and showing, not showing, like caring, and because you care, you kind of help the team where they are the best you can. But yeah, I think the abrupt shift to remote is not for everyone. If you have a small apartment, you have like a family and you cannot move. I mean, no, you want to go to the office and the office is an escape, and that's completely fair. So remote is not for everyone. And then of course the pandemic and everything that happened with it is kind of made everything worse, which explains it. CEO. So like I'm going to do a quick version. I could speak for a long time about that one. No, everything happened, I mean, started early in September. So we raised our Series C. I mean, we announced it in October, but basically we closed early September. And once the cash was in bank, kind of like didn't want to revert. Like I made a pause. Like it was a pause. I wanted to avoid going back to the day-to-day operational work. I mean, I had changed completely my calendar because of the fundraising. I was full-time fundraising. And so I used that time to do some introspection. And for about the month of September, a lot of discussions with my co-founders and with the board, kind of like, okay, what's best for the company? We're just out of a fundraising, and so obviously the potential was clear. I've spoken about that so much, but how to best reach that potential? And I realized that someone with more experience at that stage, and also more experience in the go-to-market functions, because my background is technical, and someone like that could do a better job. And that ended up by launching a CEO search in October. Fast forward, maybe a quick anecdote on this one. When I launched the search, I was not thinking about leaving I thought I would stay operational. I asked myself the question like very quickly, hey, can I still bring a lot to the company? Obviously, yes. I had done my that introspection where, okay, what do I like? What do I don't like? Where am I good? Where I'm not good? And there was a misalignment with my day-to-day, and that's why I wanted to hire someone new for that. But then I saw also all that expertise I had, like especially on the developer side, that was not leveraged, and I thought that was a mistake. And so, of course, I would work more on that. Fast forward towards the end of the search, I had like 2 types of finalists, candidates. One was, hey, I would never join if you don't stay. I need you. And one was like, oh, tell me again what you're going to do. And the truth is that, most failures when you have a change of CEO comes from conflict, or not really conflict between the CEOs, as much as the team, they have a new CEO who makes a decision, they don't like the decision, they go to see the founder and previous CEO and kind of like try to get around. And that creates a lot of conflict, and like the transition is difficult and so on. And then I spent a little more time thinking about that. Okay, what would be the role? How would that happen? It kind of, that when I kind of opened the door to leaving my like an operational role. And then I mentioned that to my wife. And then the decision was made. Yeah, I mean, in a way, like 8 years of a startup, of course, it takes a toll on the family, and kind of like that was such a great opportunity for spending more time with family. I have 3 kids, and so yeah, kind of like it was a good circumstances. And I think that if I had thought about that in September, that I would leave, I would probably have, even if it was unconscious, I would probably have lowered the bar against my will. But hey, you are going to leave, you lower the bar, I think, like unconsciously. So it was for the best in the end, because I kept the bar super high. I wanted to make sure I was making the best hire, and it's the most important hire I would ever make in my life, like for Algolia. So I think the bar needs to be the highest possible, as high as possible. And so yeah, that's basically the quick story about how that happened. And last question: society, SaaSter and SaaS talk. No, I'm not going to enter into that polemic. I love both of you. I love both of you. I love SaaSter. I love Jason. You know that Jason is also one of my investors. I know. And I love you too, Alex. So no, there is place for both SaaS talk and SaaSter.
Exactly. Good answer. I like it. Good stuff. Thank you again, Nicolas. I'll leave you back with Stephen. Thank you.
Thanks a million, Alex Thuma, CEO of SaaS Talk. I'm sure you all know that. Actually, it's a compliment that you wanted them to merge, because you were invested in the other guys. So you obviously thought we could enhance them if we merge. So SaaS Talk will take that as a great compliment. I have a question for you. It's very interesting to think about the fact that we would build mostly distributed teams today. And that GitLab manual, I don't know if it's 1,000 pages, or the ones you might get in Automatic, or the ones you might get in Basecamp, you couldn't really take those and rewire them. I'm wondering, is there a place for cultural templates as a service, where we kind of know some of the problems that, or some of the questions you need to be asking yourself in the early days, in the mid stage, or whatever? Do you think that's going to be, it might be out there already, but do you think there's, if it is, I don't think there's a really great one out there. Do you think that's going to be a thing, that could be a real business? And is that a really important thing, to have a template in place rather than starting from a blank page?
No, let me make a difference between, say, the who we are and the how we work. I don't think you can have a template about the who. You are who you are, and like these core values should come from you and you only. Of course, you can get inspiration from others, and like, but what's going to happen is that you are going to relate to some culture and not to others. And yes, you can get inspiration. The template thing could be helpful, however, in terms of how you work, especially how you work remotely. Like you should learn from the best practices. Don't reinvent everything. I mean, most of the challenges are the same for every company, and so it's silly to reinvent your own recipe for everything. You should just look at what has worked elsewhere. And I think GitLab example is a good one here, because they have done such a great job. But also, it's like, I don't know how big is their manual, but it's too big for an early stage company. I mean, you need like a week to read it. I don't know. It's pick and choose.
It's open source. It's huge.
Pick and choose. And the other thing is that, as much as I love GitLab and the way they work, they didn't start this way. What I mean is that if you are an early stage company, don't try to apply everything that GitLab is doing. Inspire yourself and just pick and choose what makes sense for you today, because many of the things they are doing today only make sense at scale. So be careful to over-engineer your kind of like your culture in a way. Yeah, and then the last way to answer the question, I don't think it's a business. I don't think it's a business in the way I qualify a startup business. I don't think you are going to create $1 billion company by building culture templates. You could do a consultancy and like live well out of it, and that's awesome, and that's a good business. But that's not a startup.
Thank you. There you go. No wonder you're in Y Combinator. Size it up into
and maybe by my experience at YC.
And of course, that template, that it's great to see that model that GitLab had developed. But also there's great blogs and the books from the Basecamp boys, Jason and DHH. They're phenomenal as well. So just for some of the early starter-uppers there's no questions coming in at the moment. Because we're kind of wrapping up soon, and I hope I don't know, will you be able to stay, by the way, to network with the guys for a little while after this? Yeah, or how are you doing for time?
Yeah, I can stay like 15 minutes more.
Okay, that's amazing. I actually meant to ask you that before we got online. I wasn't trying to put you under pressure. Thank you. You're far too generous, actually. Thank you. So people want to stay online here, and if they want to network a little bit with Nicolas, you'll be here for 15 minutes. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. In terms of kind of some of the earlier stage starter-uppers, entrepreneurs, and leaders in companies, how can, do you think that culture suddenly has become 4x, 5x more important to get a handle on early in this new normal than it was before? Is it actually an absolute key to scaling well, even more so now in the early stage than it was before?
Probably
with distributed teams.
Yeah, probably. I think it's more, the need is more intense now than it was before, at least because people are more distributed. Because when you are remote, you don't have that office place, like that workplace where people interact with each other. And so again, culture is both the who and the how.
Yes.
And if you don't have this discussion, if you don't codify the how, you basically need to codify the how way earlier than before. How you work is critical. It doesn't matter when you are like 10 people in an office space, because that's going to be organic. You don't need to codify it. But if these same 10 people are each behind a computer, completely remote, and yes, you have video, just imagine time zone. Time zone is the worst.
Yes.
If you have 9 hours or more time zone difference between team members, that means they don't have FaceTime. So you need to codify. You need to codify how you are going to work, how you are going to make sure you're in sync. And culture is even more important also to empower people. If they are at a distant time zone and they need to wait upon each other to make any decision, you are going to slow down to a crawl. It's not possible. So codifying all these elements is critical to be successful, way more than before when people were in the same space.
And before I ask you the next question, maybe Joe or Gabe would put in the comments there. Was the intention to open it up for slight networking afterwards, or have I thrown a clanger in there? So just let me know where you're going on that. Yeah, absolutely. If you look at Mars, the mission to Mars, the single biggest problem psychologically for people is the time it takes for a message to get back to Earth. It will take, and the other. That is what they think is going to be the single biggest psychological challenge. So when you have those different time zone issues, and maybe you have a minority of staff that are in time zones that you're not in, how important is it to regularly try to schedule a get-together where maybe you stay up a little bit later or you get up a little bit earlier and bring them into a group session? Do you think that's very important? If that's the situation?
The more FaceTime you have, the better. I think one of the things I've learned, in the case of Algolia, we basically had that split between Paris and San Francisco. We have other offices, but at the two main offices, and I'm in San Francisco. My co-founder is in Paris. The time zone difference has been our biggest challenge, period. There is no bigger challenge for us in the building of the companies than the time zone. And the trick here is that it becomes worse as you scale. Because when you start, you have like a few people. First, these people are like the early people. They are entrepreneur-minded. They don't mind waking up early, staying late, and you have more face time. As you scale, it's not sustainable. You get to 50, 100, like 300 people, it's not sustainable. And worse, as you scale, you need more communication. You have more people to synchronize with.
Sure.
Like that overlap shrinks, and you have more to fit in it. So it gets worse. So it's really crazy. Let me give you another experience from my new CEO. So I had a new CEO who, Bernadette, she's based in Boston. She was supposed to relocate to SF, of course. Like SF is our headquarters. Yes. And then because of the pandemic, she started remote from Boston.
Yes.
Well, today, I would probably recommend her to stay in Boston because of the time zone. Because she has basically 3 hours more overlap with the European team. That 3 hours are incredibly, it's critical. She can do such a better job thanks to that. And that leads me to think today, I completely changed my mind about like where to base your US office. Like, except if you have a really good reason to go to SF as a European founder,
East Coast.
Go to East Coast. Yeah, go East Coast. Like, you need to have a really good reason. And you can still have like employees in West Coast. But, as the founder, as the CEO, you need to be very, very transversal. You need to interact with so many members of the team that are going to be based everywhere, that having a central location is like kind of like a huge advantage. And yeah, I would today, I think even for a company like Algolia, I think for us, I don't know what I would do, but at least on the professional side, yes, our ecosystem is in SF, but especially at scale, having the leaders based in like a central location, I mean, the advantage completely outweighs it's huge.
Thank you very much. And I see we finally, I was about to bring you in. That's why I was clicking around, but somebody else got you in there. Michael Rager, how are you?
Very well, thank you. And sorry for the disturbance earlier. I'm very glad that we make it. And Nicolas, pleasure to talking to you again. And just one thing that I always find curious, as you mentioned before, when the company crashes, and were there, or rather, how often were there times where you realized, okay, I need to make some foundational implementation on a cultural perspective that is the best for the company, but it actually would go against, and how did you sort of address that on a personal level? Because I would assume as the company grows, you as a CEO grow as a person. And so how did you address that challenge?
Okay, I don't know if you have a good answer on this one. Okay, let me give you an anecdote. Like one of the things that happened in the laptop company. Maybe that will illustrate the kind of things that you have to go through. 2018, like about 150 people, actually, about when we had that kind of like need of codifying more how we work. One thing happened. We changed from having an open compensation policy to not sharing it anymore. So what happened is that until like 150 people, we had a spreadsheet, a Google Doc, that was basically open to everyone in the company with the list of all team members and their compensation, including the stock options. So everyone, it was all transparent. It was it was good and bad, of course, like there were pros and cons, but some great positive impact here was the trust. It was kind of like a huge example of what we meant by trust. Like it was the transparency at its core. It had like advantages, like, I don't know, like I didn't even realize that at first, but later on when we were discussing about that, it was a great tool to make sure you didn't have a difference in compensation based on your, I don't know, are you based on your gender, based on whatever. Everything was transparent. You couldn't hide. It was great also, you are a manager, you promote someone, not someone else. It's visible, it's transparent. You cannot hide anything. So you have to be able to justify any choice you make. So all of that was great. And of course, people would disagree with some of the decisions, but they would accept, they would respect them. They knew that they would default to trust. You know, they would think that, I mean, even if they don't agree, they know that you have the best intention. They would, because it's transparent. Fast forward I think it was in May 18 that we stopped that. We actually had a survey of the team, and 90% of the company wanted to keep that policy, but we ended up like stopping. The main reason was privacy laws. Basically, we were sharing private information without consent. And even if we had asked for consent, that was when GDPR got in place. And even if we had consent, that kind of consent, you couldn't claim it was like, how do you say, like, you know, like given like free, because there was like peer pressure, whatever. So basically we stopped. And that's when we realized we had been very complacent with our trust value. You know, hey, are you transparent? Of course, look, we even share compensation. So obviously we are transparent. Like, it's not a question. And then you stop sharing that. Oh, again, what are we transparent? Like, what else do we share? Like, I mean, of course, I mean, we were transparent. We were sharing a lot of things, but what we didn't have was clarity in how we make decisions, where we were going. Like, and that's basically when we started to implement this, like, kind of, like, building that clarity, implementing OKRs, like getting all that, working on all that piece of the culture, like how we work, formalizing all of that, which was necessary. And this event kind of made us realize how late we were on that. We had built some debt there that we had to pay back. And to get back to your question, I, as a founder, like as how I look at the world, at my values, like I love that policy. I kind of like remove that policy against not my will, of course. At the end of the day, I was the one deciding, but you know, my guts, I wanted to keep it, and it ended up deciding not to keep it, and that was a tough decision. It led to a lot of tension in the company. Like people, like some of the early employees were like really frustrated about us stopping that. They believed we were kind of like becoming the wrong company or whatever, like, you know, and that hurts a lot when you make such a decision and you have people, I don't know, saying like feeling bad because of that and believing you don't have their back anymore or whatever. It hurts a lot because that's not your intention, obviously.
Okay.
Thanks, Michael and Rachel. That's great.
Yeah. All right. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. We finally got your question. It was a great one. Thanks, Michael. Just before we wrap up, I just want to comment. Nicolas, Annabelle de Vetter made a great point about, you know, publishing employee stories internally, and it made me think about Intercom. Intercom actually not every company can do this, but they have fantastic internal designers and content creators. They actually make a comic book story and publish it in beautiful color and artwork about each employee every 1 year anniversary. And it's apparently and they base it on the characteristics of the employee, stuff they've done during the year. But that's so I suppose there are actually companies that actually do the employee story thing to the nth degree. Cool. Yeah. It is pretty cool. So actually, when people talk to me about culture and co-location, I often would say, look at Algolia, look at Intercom. I'd often do that. Just to say, Nicolas, I think there's going to be, I think you have another 7 minutes or something. You're going to be okay till 15:15 or something. I think the guys, there's going to be some networking there for the next, 22 minutes. I'll probably leave the scene, otherwise it'll look like there's something still going on here. I might stay logged in, but thank you so much. There's only a couple of minutes there for you anyway, but maybe somebody wants to grab Nicolas and ask him a question. But before we kind of shut the cameras down, I just want to say you're an inspiration. You're genuine. I don't want to overdo it because it sounds like I come from speaking Silicon Valley ease, but because that's not me. But you are an inspiration. You're very humble. It's overused, that word, but you're a very humble guy. We were talking about arrogance and stuff earlier. You're definitely the type of founder that some founders can be arrogant. It depends on, and it can work, but you're definitely the non-arrogant founder. I remember you telling me it's all about empowering the employees. You didn't just say it. It kind of came out in about 10 stories over the conversations we've had. I can't think of anyone better to bring in and talk about company culture. You live it as well. You're a good guy to talk to outside of all of this, so I can only imagine the same internally. Thank you so much for coming on to SaaS Talk Engage and sharing your wisdom. It's always great.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was great to be with you today.
It's great to have you, Nicolas. Thanks a million.
Thanks, and thanks everyone.